Hello, welcome to part 14 of my series, The History of Summerhill School through 100 objects. So this is object 14, and it's a strange object, but it's what's inside it really. If we have a look inside, hopefully it's in focus. There. So my object today is snow, and these are crystals. They look like snow crystals, they're not. This actually is a sort of remake of a weather device that was taken by captains on ships at the time of Charles Darwin's exploration of the Galapagos Islands, and Captain Fitzroy, the captain of the Beagle, which Charles Darwin was lucky enough to be on as a companion. He wasn't actually employed necessarily as the naturalist on board. There was another man who was a naturalist. He was just the companion for Captain Fitzroy, because Fitzroy had a family history of mental illness. Anyway, we're looking at snow. And I remember being in the staff room, and it was one Saturday morning at Summerhill School, and I heard this scream of joy, this shout of joy from the lounge where the school has its meetings and things. And it was a young girl, and she was American, and it was her first term, I think, at Summerhill, and it was the first time that she had seen snow in England. So she was shouting for joy, "Snow! It's snowing! It's snowing!" And she came running into the staff room saying, "It's snowing! Look outside! Look outside!" And you could see it was snowing very heavily and very, very dramatically. And I thought, that's a wonderful way to start my Saturday. But the problem with Summerhill sometimes, well, it's not a problem with the school, is that it is science hour on Saturday and Sundays. I can't remember when, but until like 10 or 11 o'clock. It depends on the place where you are in terms of how old the children are in each area. But they have science hours, and during the science hour you aren't allowed to shout. For whatever reason, you're not meant to make a noise. So she had woken up some young children who lived just above the lounge, and because she'd broken science hour, she was brought before the committee meeting, and was fined for breaking science hour. I spoke in her defence. I said she's a new student, and she was so excited about the snow, but yeah, she was still fined. Anyway, and the other thing, there's lots of things about snow, because it seems to be a wonderful thing at Summerhill, and sadly we seem to see less and less of it each year. But when it does snow and it lays on the ground, we have fantastic snowball fights. So I used to be walking along the carriage path from where when I was a shack house parent, when I was a house parent for the sort of 13, 14-year-olds, and their area is just next to where the older children, the 14 to 17-year-olds live, called the carriages. And I would walk up the path towards the school, and then zoof, a snowball would fly past, and zoof, another snowball would fly past, and I'd be walking through a snowball fight. And I would join in sometimes, but towards when I got a bit older, I would shout, "I'm not playing! I'm not taking part! I'm not taking part! I'll bring you up if you throw another snowball at me!" So I would use the meeting and the meeting to stop them throwing at me, and then I'd just watch them fight together. It would be all the children and staff, and we had one fantastic member of staff called Philip, who was an English teacher at the time, and he was so accurate. I mean, if I hadn't had time to say I'm not playing and I'm not taking part, it would be his snowball that would hit my behind, or even if I was running, trying to avoid it. He was a very accurate thrower. So yeah, snow is a really important part of play and life at Summerhill. And another time, for some reason, the older students, well, the oldest, the carriage kids, built a huge snowball across from one building to the other, and in between the buildings was the carriage path. So it meant that you couldn't walk down the carriage path. and it was like a barrier to prevent the other kids, the ones that I was looking after, the shack kids, the 12 to 14-year-olds, preventing them from walking down the path to where they were living. So it was quite. So what happened next was that the shack kids built their own wall further down, and it was like there was a battle between the two walls, and then Will, the woodwork teacher, came along because a number of staff had commented, and students had commented that they couldn't, that it was blocked, the pathway from the shack, and Will, who had some responsibility in terms of being the vice principal of the school. He's the son of Zoe Redhead, the owner. He sort of decided that it was a fire hazard, that it meant that you had to take a longer route to the fire assembly point away from the shack, and it also meant that you couldn't go down to the shack as straight away, the shack area, in order to, if anything wrong had happened there. So he got. Can't remember what he got. Whether he got machinery or not. He might have had to use a what are they called for cutting down trees? Well, anyway, he used stuff from the woodwork to actually cut a doorway through the wall, which took some time and some doing. But much to the dismay of the carriage kids, but who then, because there was enough bits of wall left, there was a wonderful fight going on. So, and then of course we have ice slides, so with the wonderful tarmac that was put down, and then tarmac, amazing, at a time at a conference I was at in London, about play and rights and things, a lot of the adults there were complaining about the tarmac in their playgrounds and the getting rid of the trees and replacing grass areas with tarmac and for safety and keep. And we were actually celebrating Summerhill the fact that tarmac was laid down in place of all the mud paths that we had, because tarmac was great for rollers blading and for skateboarding and things like that. But so the students would on any incline, the students would be running and sliding on the snow and things, and creating and pouring water on it and things to create wonderful ice slides. Which takes me to A.S. Neil's wonderful story in Dominie's Log, his first book about his head teachership in Gretna Green School, where he was. It was the first time he became a head of a school, a state elementary school, and he describes. Sort of walking to the school one early one morning in the winter, and there the children are playing on the roads, just sliding on the ice, and he joins in and slides on the ice, and so do his teaching assistants. So you can imagine that in this village, I wonder what the other adults would have thought, the parents would have thought of seeing this. Their head teacher, who would be seen to be an eminent member of the community, in his jacket and tie and shirt and smart trousers, sliding along the road with the children. And then later on he talks about the fact that I don't know if it's the same day or same week, but it's the same year. He talks about the fact that at lunchtime, I think it is, they come in early after lunch, so they don't have their full lunch break. And he says, well, why have you come in early? Why aren't you out sliding on the road and playing on the ice slide? And they say, oh, well, the policeman has salted the slide, and it's not there anymore. And he said, well, why did the policeman salt the slide? And the children say, oh, because the farmer the farmer had asked him to, because the farmer's horse and cart, the farmer was worried that his horse would slide, fall and break a leg or damage himself. And this leads then on to a discussion led by Neil, but a class discussion on why the farmer wanted to protect the horse, and why the policeman listened to the farmer but would never listen to the children, though they wouldn't have spoken to, I don't think, but if they had. And Neil says to the children, he says, well, what do you think the farmer sort of was protecting his, why do you think the farmer was protecting his horse? And they'd say, well, because it could get hurt, it could be in pain. And Neil says, no, the farmer's protecting his horse because it's property, because he needs the horse for the cart, and it's part of his profit, of his making profit, and he doesn't really care about the pain or the suffering of the horse, because if you see the farmer, you'll see him hitting the horse to get him faster, yeah. Or if he doesn't move, or if he gets a bit that the horse hasn't been well cared for by the farmer. So it's not for the sake of the horse that the farmer asked him to salt, the policeman to salt the road. And then Neil goes on to chat about the fact that you only have a voice if you have some input, if you have a vote, if you can affect the people that you're asking. And he says, yeah, women get half or less of the wages of men. Look at the conditions in which they work, the women, and you'll find they work in much worse situations than men. And it's because they don't have a vote. So he goes on to discuss the vote with them, and he says, look, they'll listen to the policeman will listen to the farmer because he's a landowner. He has a vote, but they won't listen to you because you're children and you don't have a vote. And he ends by saying, I hope the children may create their own charter of children's rights. Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because when you hear that story, and it's a head teacher discussing with the children, and he's discussing something in which he takes part. So his life, the children will know, will be affected by the salting of the slide. It's not just he's talking to them about their lives that are separate from his, but also, if that was in a school today and it was in a citizenship lesson, then they might do a survey of the area. They might, do a survey of what adults and children think about the slide, is it dangerous or not, and then they might talk about issues to do with making a road safe for play. Yeah, and there's a movement now in various cities about closing roads to make them safe for play. But Neil doesn't go into that kind of thing. He doesn't go into sort of discussion about how could we, can we make a nice slide somewhere else, say, or how could we create places where we could play. He doesn't go into that, which I think they would do today. What he goes into is about power, and the power linked to rights and to democracy, which really every single citizenship lesson in the whole country and the whole world should be based on. Yeah. And also, of course, our children at Summerhill build fantastic snowmen, and they're fantastic. And there's a sense of humour about it, building snow families. And one time, Will, again, the woodwork teacher, he brought in, I think it was Will, it may have been one of, like Tony, his father's, may have done it, or Neil, the other son, who's a farmer, of Zoe Redhead and Tony Redhead. Anyway, whoever did it, they brought in a tractor, and they used the tractor to get a huge body of the snowman, a huge head, sorry, I think they created a head and parts of the body, and then the children worked with all these huge bits of snow to make this ginormous snowman. Yeah. Which was like twice as big as any human being. It was really, really cool. On the field, on the what's called the hockey field. And then another story is that we were snowed in once. I mean, the snow was so great that some of our staff who lived locally couldn't come in because all the roads were blocked in terms of the snow and the ice. So, too much screaming of joy and celebration. Our maths teacher, who at the time was living in a local village, was on board one of those fantastic tractors where the four wheels are ginormous, and it looks like it's a vehicle from Mars because huge tractors, tyres on each and wheels on each of the four wheels, ginormous. So this thing came driving down the school drive and driving in front of the schoolhouse, and we all cheered, and it was very funny and very surreal, and it was very good. And the maths teacher was, I think, a bit embarrassed by our fantastic welcome. So there are some wonderful stories to do with snow, and the fact that snow is such an important part of the joy and play of Summerhill and the wonderful landscape of childhood. Thank you very much indeed. Bye bye.